morning. It is Wednesday, July 8th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, a year to the day after Israel's Operation Protective Edge, Gaza still struggles to rebuild itself. The Eurozone gives Greece till Thursday now to present new proposals to secure a deal with creditors, another deadline. And later on the show, we look at the lives of diplomats' wives in the Middle East and the modern challenges of that traditional role. Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and we begin here in Israel today. This week marks 1 year since the start of the bloody war between Israel and Gaza and the beginning of Israel's Operation Protective Edge. An operation that lasted 51 days and claimed the lives of 2,200 people in Gaza, including at least 551 children. 72 people died in Israel, including 6 civilians, one of whom was a child. Children on both sides, needless to mention, suffered enormously and are still suffering. A year on, though, the détente between Israel and Hamas has largely been maintained, save for some attempts by rogue groups to instigate a conflict, which both main opponents do not seem to want to ignite in the near future. That said, the infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, where hundreds of thousands of people have also lost their homes, is far from being rebuilt. Joining me in studio is Reshet Bet, Arab Affairs correspondent Eran Zinger. Good morning to you. Also with us, UNRWA spokesperson Chris Gunnis.
Good morning.
Good morning. And before we break this down, let's take a look at the following report about Gaza a year on and break it down from there.
1 year ago, the world's attention was focused on Gaza. The Palestinian territory saw the deadliest, longest, and most destructive Israeli offensive of the 3 wars it has witnessed in the last 7 years. In 50 days of war between Israel and Palestinian militants, more than 2,000 Palestinians were killed, among them 500 children. Despite a ceasefire that has largely held, there has been little reason for residents here to believe their suffering will soon end.
It's changed for the worse, not for the better. It was better before, when the world paid attention to the people here and provided aid. But after the war, it all stopped, as if nothing at all had happened.
Before the war, 2/3 of the Gaza population depended on food assistance, and more than 40% were unemployed. Little has changed since a 9-year-old Israeli blockade has slowed reconstruction, strangled exports, and created legions of unemployed.
I'm doing this job against my will, because there's no work here, only this. There's no alternative. I collect stones around 5 carts, and then I sell each one for 10 Israeli shekels.
A recent poll showed that 1 in 2 Gazans want to leave the territory. With both Egypt and Israel tightening the land borders they control, dozens have drowned attempting to illegally immigrate to Europe via the Mediterranean.
I think what's different after this last conflict than even after the previous 2 was a much higher sense of hopelessness, that there really was not a feeling that the conditions were going to improve, more desire to leave. The feeling that their children's lives were not going to be better than their own.
The last UN schools which hosted the displaced have now closed, pushing more people into the street. And conflict between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority has complicated the task of setting Gaza on the road to recovery. It's a situation that serves the interests of local jihadist groups who reject the ceasefire with Israel. They, and not Hamas, have claimed credit for the recent rocket fire into Israel.
Let's go straight to Gaza. We're first joined by Gaza journalist Abir Ayoub. Abir, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us. And I think, irrespective of what one believes about the war, the place hardest hit was Gaza. What is the situation in Gaza a year on when it comes, to the feeling of the people of Gaza? Any hope left of rebuilding?
Okay, so a year after the war, I can tell you that the situation is going from bad to worse and worse. People really lost their hope for the reconstruction, because however thousands of houses were demolished, not a single house was reconstructed so far. And because of the internal conflicts inside, the donating countries is not finding a body that they can deal with. So it's even more complicated right now. So, the feeling of the people, they are completely disappointed, completely down, and completely not hopeful that the reconstruction is going to happen anytime soon.
Definitely. No, and it sounds devastating with the hundreds of thousands of homes that were destroyed. When it comes to Hamas's rule in the Gaza Strip at this point in time, is there this sweeping support for Hamas by the people of Gaza? Are there any voices calling for some type of change?
However, people are disappointed, but Hamas is not the only one to blame. However, it is the government. But Hamas, it's not by its own. It can't be someone who would, get the building materials and the support of the international community.
Definitely.
Because, it's not authorized by most of the international countries. So by Hamas itself, the reconstruction can't happen, and people know that. So it needs, all the factions and all the governments, especially the PA, to be united in supporting so that the reconstruction can happen.
No, and in that respect, just opening the discussion here, Abir, I would love it if you can stay with us on the line, if you can hear the discussion here in the studio. Hans Singer, Arab Affairs correspondent. I want to start with you just when it comes, though, a year on, many people that you discuss, that you speak with, both, I think in Gaza and Israel, civilians, always turn to journalists and say, this year there will not be a war. We're correct in saying there won't, because at the end of the day, looking at the situation in Gaza, I think both Hamas and Israel, and correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, realize they do not have the stamina, any side, of carrying another conflict. But is there any contact between the two sides, as we've been hearing?
Well, you're totally right. I don't think that either Israel or Hamas have their interest right now to have another war in Gaza. This is not something that we're going to see. There are two major elements here. The first one is Hamas needs Israel for the reconstruction of Gaza. And this is one of the most interesting results.
Ironic
Yes, you're
results,
totally right. To be more sincere, Israel is helping Hamas more than the PA, than the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, when it comes to for the reconstruction of Gaza. This is what we see right now. The second element is what's going on in the region. ISIS is a major threat, not only to Israel and the Egyptian government, it's also a threat for Hamas. And I see, and this is where I get back to the shared interest we have a year after. What we didn't have a year ago was the ISIS or the Salafi movements getting so stronger and stronger as there are right now.
Right.
And this is where you have a very special combination of elements here, saying that this is not the time for another front between Israel and Hamas. This is not something that is likely to happen. We heard the very senior Israeli official yesterday saying that it seems very unreasonable right now for both sides to get into another combat or conflict.
Not only that, I think there's always a constant feeling that when there's a rogue missile that flies out of Gaza, that both sides are trying to kind of calm down any type of possible flare-up.
We only saw it a few weeks ago,
right,
when when a rocket was launched from Gaza, and Hamas did everything they could in order to stop it, and they did. And if you look backwards, a year ago, Israel did know where the commanders of Hamas were hiding. You could hear Israeli officials saying on live television, they said, we know that they're hiding under the Shifa hospital in Gaza. In other words, we could kill them all, but we didn't, because Israel knew that once you take over Hamas, or once you demolish Hamas, you'll get something even worse. This is why a very senior Israeli officer said yesterday, Hamas is still strong on the one hand, but on the other hand, they learned their lesson.
It's going to lead me eventually to a discussion with all of you on the possibility of maybe one day down the future, in a perfect world, Hamas and Israel's talking. But let's not be too optimistic. I'm saying this, sarcastically.
Yeah, they did talk to free Gilad Shalit. So let's not pretend there's this weird fetishistic injunction about you can't talk to Hamas. Israel does talk to Hamas.
True.
Israel talked to Hamas to get Gilad Shalit out. So that Rubicon has been crossed.
Has been crossed.
We've been there.
It
so
can be
let's
done.
not get hung up on that one. The fact is, and not for the first time, I agree entirely with Aaron Zinger's analysis. There is this strange alliance,
if you like. In many ways.
But what will come of it? Because right now we've got 100,000 homeless people. And if the war's going to start again, it's going to become because of frustration of that kind. Now, what is Israel doing? What is Hamas doing to make sure that that frustration goes away, that the homes are rebuilt? Right now, we need about 400 trucks a day of what's called ABC. These are building materials, basically, to go through. We're getting about a tenth of that, or at least a tiny fraction of it. So, okay, there is this strange alliance. Let's see something real coming from it, because only if something real comes from it are we going to head off the possibility of renewed hostility. There's no war, but there is a conflict.
Entirely, but, you know, and going back to the point of discussion and talk between Hamas and Israel, Abir, if you're still with us on the line, then my question to you is, do you believe that if there was, let's say tomorrow morning, there's an announcement that comes out that Hamas and Israel are speaking to each other, there are negotiations going on for a possible détente, would that be accepted by the population of Gaza, by the civilians of Gaza?
For the meantime, I believe yes, because for the meantime, what people in Gaza need is reconstruction and long time of ceasefire, and it's not the very good time for another round of the conflict. So, I mean, it's not very far away from their minds, because at the end of the day, there are two sides of the conflict, and it's not very far away if they are negotiating to achieve what they want, because at the end of the day, in the last days of the war, both sides were indirectly negotiating for a ceasefire, for having an airport, a seaport in Gaza. So it's not very far away from people's minds.
You know, one would hope, but we've been hearing the same thing about, you know, these possible negotiations, Q in Iran Zinger. Then my question to you is, all these rumors, suppositions, and reports that supposedly Israel and Hamas have been speaking via third party over the course of the last several weeks, is that towards was it a 5-year tahadiyah or hudna? I'm probably messing this up, but is there is it credible information, and is that something that we might be seeing, especially under this right-wing government of Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I believe that there are some attempts by the Israeli government and Hamas to reach some kind of understanding, not directly maybe through a third party. And this is the major question. Who is the third party to talk to Hamas right now? And this is a very interesting thing, because when you ask the question, do you talk to Hamas, the more precise question should be, which Hamas are you talking about? Are you talking about the military wing of Hamas, or are you talking about the political wing of Hamas? Because both sides are now almost separated. The military wing of Hamas has almost been taken over by Iran. The Iranians are doing the best they can in order to control Hamas, as they do right now in Yemen, in Damascus, in Lebanon, and in Iraq, of course. The political, and this is a major question mark, the political wing of Hamas is now being treated differently by the Saudis and the Egyptians, because the Egyptian government is also asking Hamas to help them, and they know that they should talk to some elements in Hamas in order to make sure that the terrorist elements in northern Sinai won't get stronger. So this is the major question. When you ask the question, are Israelis talking to Hamas? I think that the question is, who in Hamas is the real address to talk to?
One of the main issues that I think everybody's considering also between Israel and Palestinians when negotiations are going on, a very, very valid point. And, you know, in that respect, though, and, you know, I'm going to go back to Chris Gunness, if these negotiations are going on, and as you said, that Rubicon can be crossed, et cetera, still, at the end of the day, it's the people in Gaza, the people themselves. We know reconstruction has not been really incredibly well. But yesterday, we had an NGO worker in the studio who said that the thing that was most devastating about Gaza when he came in after last year's war is the complete loss of hope of the population. Is that still the case, do you feel?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're a child in Gaza, you've lived through, if you're 6 or 7, you've lived through 3 terrifying wars, and these children are being re-traumatized with every war. But you look at your parents, there's 43% unemployment. The World Bank report recently said it was the highest unemployment anywhere in the world, highest youth unemployment in the region. So what future is there? There is, however, an answer. It's not all despair. Gaza needs to export. Gaza is essentially an export economy, which means import things cheaply, make something, and sell it at a profit. And, you know, we all talk about the blockade as if it's what goes in. It's also what comes out. You know, if Israel wasn't allowed to export, the country would, you know, you'd say the place. Exactly. So what Gaza needs, you know, we can rebuild Gaza tomorrow morning. If they are left on the life support of international aid, which is bad, it's wrong, and it's distorting, and I work for an aid organisation, we don't want to be doing these food handouts. What Gaza needs is to be able to export. There is a perfectly good security system at Kerem Shalom, paid for by the Dutch government. You can export through it very, very easily. That policy needs to be re-examined, because if you rebuild Gaza tomorrow, and if, as Eran says, there is this alliance, where does that alliance go? Surely it has to go in the direction of some kind of economic development, because without it, you can reconstruct Gaza, the conflict will continue, believe me.
And you now get some very interesting indications that things are maybe starting to change. There's a very interesting headline this morning in Haaretz newspaper by Amos Harel.
No, it's quoted, definitely.
Saying that the IDF is suggesting that changes should be made when it comes to the blockade on Gaza. In other words, Israel should do more for the welfare of the Palestinians living in Gaza.
And that coming from the IDF, that coming from the military.
Yes. And it's because the military understand the consequences of having this continued standoff. The military are the ones who pay the price. 66 of those Israelis who died were soldiers, by the way.
Exactly.
So they know the price of continued conflict, and they are absolutely right in saying to the civilian politicians, we have to ease this illegal blockade. It's a collective punishment. It's bad for Israel on the international stage to be violating international law. It's also bad domestically, because why should 6 million civilians in Israel be constantly thinking about when the next barrage of rockets is about to slam into their homes?
But if I may add, there's something even more complicated, or there's another element making things even more complicated. It's the third party here. It's the PA in Ramallah. They are not seeing, or they are not looking in a very positive way, the fact that that Israel and Hamas are maybe negotiating, because in their eyes, they're saying
it destabilizes their role entirely.
Of course, because Hamas. I mean, after the war, a year ago, it was suggested, or it was said, it was told that Abu Mazen or the Abbas forces will be able to enter the
Gaza Strip,
the cross borders, the border crosses inside Gaza, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen not because of Israel. It didn't happen because of Hamas, and now we see that the PA is doing everything they can in order to make sure that Hamas will not be able to control Gaza the way it wants to, with the help of Israel.
There's one very other important sort of factor in all this, if I may, very briefly, El. Many Israelis say defund UNRWA, get rid of UNRWA, because somehow you get rid of the right of return, which of course is a nonsensical argument. We are now at the point, with our school year looming, of being $101 million in deficit. And if we don't fill that in a matter of weeks, we're going to have to take a very hard decision about whether we can open our schools at the start of the academic year. We have 240,000 kids in Gaza in our schools. If they are on the streets because we cannot open our schools, let me tell you, that is a big problem for Israel. It's a big problem for all of us.
It's a big problem for the region. And that deficit is something that, but apropos, here's my, final question to you. Do you think, UNRWA, the plight for, for the Palestinians in Gaza, but not just that, also a push for any type of reconciliation or negotiations between Israel and Hamas has been completely swept off the international agenda?
I fear it has.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. And it doesn't look like it's coming back in many ways.
I mean, it's difficult to know where it would start. I mean, Eran is talking about very secretive talks, this, that, and the other. But what we need is a proper peace process. We don't need, some guys talking in a smoky back room. We need accountability. We need to see what's going on. That is what we all deserve, and that's what the politicians should be delivering to us.
And definitely the people of the region. I think on these, hopeful, actually, requests, we're going to wrap this discussion up. I want to thank you all for being with us. Abir, thank you also for being with us in Gaza. As we said, a year on, no war this summer, but sadly, so much more work left to be done. Let's move along. Moving on to Greece, where apparently the real drama, or tragedy, as some people would like to deem it, is playing out. The leaders, European leaders, gave Greece a stark ultimatum last night. Reach a new bailout agreement with its creditors by Sunday, or face bankruptcy and expulsion from the euro currency system. Now, the leaders gave Greece until Thursday first to submit new economic reform proposals to justify fresh lending by international creditors. We're looking at live pictures of Greece, because this morning, yet again, as has been happening over the course of the last 10 days, Greeks, civilians, citizens in Greece, and there's obviously Tsipras, Tsipras, who leads the country and led it through this campaign across from the European creditors. But the people in Greece still are standing at ATMs with a limit of money they can bring out. People are basically staying in home, and there's no cash flow. This is Live Greece this morning with yet another deadline to meet, or again, an expulsion from the EU threatened by the European Union. Let's first take a look at the report coming out yesterday from Greece before this new deadline was imposed and what led to it, and then break it down.
Is the tide changing for Greece? Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras arrived in Brussels Tuesday for another round of talks with Eurozone leaders, backed by a landslide vote in his favor in the referendum on the European bailout deal. Swayed by his symbolic win, Eurozone leaders seem to be making more conciliatory statements towards Athens.
I am also often annoyed by what the current Greek government is doing, but part of the truth is the misery is not their fault. Rather, it's the previous governments, the economic and political elite which plundered the country. It must be said that Europe stood by and watched for a pretty long time and said nothing and did nothing.
And as finance ministers gathered in Brussels to examine the next steps for Greece, they stressed again that the country's exit from the Eurozone is not on the table, despite the referendum results.
Greece, it would be a failure. It would be a terrible mistake. It would be a collective failure. We don't want it. The Commission doesn't want it.
But a so-called Grexit clearly remains a divisive issue among European ministers.
The word Brexit is being mentioned, but not as a stick, but as a possibility. It's a realistic possibility, but really we should study both and evaluate both proposals, to be in and to also for Greece to be out.
Tsipras, however, is preparing a proposal for Eurozone leaders with a specific set of demands, among which securing liquidity for Greece's financial system, credible reforms with reduced recessionary impacts, a strong program for growth in Greece, and restructuring of debt, including writing off and rescheduling repayments. Meanwhile, back in Athens, the country's stock exchange will remain closed until Wednesday, in line with the country's banks, as Greece struggles to avoid bankruptcy.
And we're going to go first straight live to Athens, where we're joined by strategic communications consultant Stratos Safolias. Good morning to you, Stratos.
Good morning. Okay,
another deadline, another looming red line in the sand, so to speak. Greece this morning. What are the people of Greece saying? You know, because this is becoming, it's turned from a drama to a tragedy and now a complete mess.
I think the people are coming to the realization that this is not just another deadline. This may very well be the deadline. And the Prime Minister, after the recent referendum, is dominating the political landscape. He has the backing of the opposition, and now he himself can sign an agreement and take it through the Parliament. He can become the Prime Minister that comes with an agreement, or he can become the first Prime Minister that will take the country from the euro to the drachma. Don't get me wrong, I think the European leadership will share a big responsibility, but me as a Greek, I'll have to have responsible my Prime Minister and my government, and I hope that they'll do the responsible thing, and the responsible thing is to come with an agreement. This is not just another deadline.
Stratos, no, amazing words and very interesting. Do stay with us on the phone. I'm joined in studio by Daniel Roth, I-24 News economy correspondent, who freshly returned, Stratos, from Athens, from where you're at. I wish you guys would have a chance to have a drink, but maybe it's hard to find cash flow to buy one. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Stratos saying, and you agreed with him before, you know, the report came on, that this is the deadline. Do you agree that this is it?
Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like you know, I think everyone knew that the referendum wasn't a deadline. Right. It was a major push forward to understand where the Greek people stood, and that was the point, and that's why it was a very important day. But now, a week later, we're looking at an actual deadline where we actually see divides in the European leadership. We see after the referendum, Greece seems to be much more unified, as Stratos mentioned. Europe seems to be now with different leaders saying different things, suggesting that a Grexit is imminent, others saying a deal must be made. It's unclear now where Europe lies.
And when it comes to that, you know, that plan, Stratos, if you're still with us, do we know what type of plan or what type of, you know, parameters Tsipras and the new finance minister can lay down? Do we know if there is any type of new plan that they're looking to present to the European Union? And why was that not to the European Union? Why was that not handed in over the course of the last several days?
Well, I think everybody's coming to the realization that this plan will be whatever the creditors and the Greek government was close to agree a week ago, only harder, and it will probably take into account the destruction of the economy in the past 2 weeks. I still have some faith into the European institutions. I think the European leadership, despite all the talk, understands that Grexit is a very dangerous proposition. So they may try to ameliorate the risk and also try to offer something. This is a very important time. Remember once Lagarde says about decisions made by adults in the room? This is the time for adults in the room to take the big decisions.
To take the big decisions, rightly so. Daniel, wondering with you, I mean, Europe, many saying that Europe cannot afford Greece to leave. Is that the case indeed? I mean, if there's a Grexit, is that the domino effect that begins like that?
It's possible. It's not. It's not a given that we would see Spain and Italy and Portugal. They may look. You know, one of the things that's important to remember is people look and say, Greece, why can't you act more like Portugal, more like Ireland, more like these countries that went through austerity measures? Right. One of the things they don't talk about is that those countries are still in deep debt. They're simply not fighting about it.
You know, they simply didn't raise their hands and said that, yeah, this is not working. Okay.
They figured out a way to stabilize that debt a little bit, like most countries in the world do. Right. Greece is saying, look, you've crippled us. We've done the most cuts out of all of the debtor nations in Europe. Right. They have, by the numbers, they've cut more things, 25% of government jobs. You know, and they're still looking at major unemployment. It's a major question whether they can handle the kind of deal Europe wants.
The kind of deal that Europe wants, and that remains to be seen. But as we said, and as Daniel Roth mentioned, this seems to be the final cutoff time, and that all transpires in the coming week. And that is the biggest drama going on in Europe right now. Daniel, thank you for being with us. Real quickly, in the short answer, how did you find the Greeks when you were there?
Amazing people. Lovely, nice, giving.
Still calm, given the situation.
And absolutely relaxed through everything.
Okay, listen, you know, they are the cradle of civilizations in many ways. Stratos, thank you very much for joining us as well. When we get back, a string of arrests among Israeli Bedouins show that ISIS is slowly gaining a foothold in the country. We will take a closer look. First, as in every morning, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition on this...
Pretty sure it's July 8th.
You are? You're convinced?
That's 100%.
100% sure. July 8th, still 2015. There is still a Greek drama unfolding far behind us, but we're sitting here, it's calm.
Yeah.
And I know, I have no idea where I'm going with this. But
well, we're talking about a different deadline.
A different deadline.
This deadline has already passed as well.
Hold on, Ami Kaufman, with the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
Sorry about that.
Ta-da! Yeah, shoot.
Another deadline has passed yesterday with the July 7th. I think I told you, right? I told you it was not going to happen. Iran and the P5+1.
Oh my God, I lost our bet.
Yeah, that's the second time you lost.
It's the second time I lost the bet.
The question is, are we going to bet again? Because according to The Guardian, they will be extended the talks by a further 3 days. That means they have until Friday, if I'm correct, to reach another deal. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but we have a report about this. I think we should see it.
Let's take a look.
No champagne bottles in Vienna Tuesday as the second deadline slips away and negotiators stop the clock. After the P5+1 foreign ministers met Tuesday morning without their Iranian counterpart, the slowdown in discussions left the negotiators with no choice but to continue the discussions, with Friday, July 10, the new target date to reach a deal.
We are extending our deadline. I told you 1 week ago, more or less, we are interpreting in a flexible way our deadline, which means that we are taking the time, the days we still need to finalize the agreement, which is something that is still possible, even if now we're getting into the difficult time.
The main setbacks are a few tough sticking points for which the teams are struggling to find solutions, namely the pace and method of lifting sanctions or re-employing them if a deal is violated, inspection of Iran's so-called possible military dimensions by the IAEA, and the issue of a UN Security Council arms embargo, which bans arms exports to the Islamic Republic.
For France's part, we are insisting especially on necessary limitation on nuclear research and development, sanctions and their re-establishment, and the possible military dimension of past Iranian nuclear work.
The P5+1 foreign ministers are expected to leave Vienna once again in the coming days and then return for what may be the definitive final push.
I just want to add that there's also some disagreement inside the P5+1. Russia and China are for lifting the arms embargo that was just mentioned in this report, whereas the other four guys are still, they want to have the arms embargo intact.
I know, and it would be hard for me. It's not surprising that it's Russia and China, because I think, lifting the arms embargo means that more arms deal can be made between Iran and Russia, which they have been doing over the course of the last several years. But, to me, I got to say this, and you know what? I'm veering aside and saying this as a parent. Can world leaders stick by the word on deadlines? Seriously.
I don't think it's going to happen. No,
right?
No, it's not going to happen. We've seen it in Greece.
It's never going to happen.
We're seeing it in Iran. We're just constantly disappointed.
Constantly disappointed. But we are keeping an eye on this new deadline.
Yes. On to Yemen, where we're getting reports now that Monday was probably the most deadly day in the war, the 3-month war that has started with the Saudi Arabia-led coalition. Over 176 fighters and civilians died in Yemen on Monday in various attacks. And this is as a UN envoy is in Yemen trying to talk to Houthi rebels and trying to reach an agreement for another ceasefire. But the Houthi officials said that Monday's attacks had dealt a serious blow to these efforts.
No, and a serious blow to these efforts, and just to remind people that there was a ceasefire that lasted only 5 days.
5 days for humanitarian
aid. Reasons, and that the war is being played out definitely being played out in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran in Yemen.
And of course, meanwhile, the civilians are the ones that are suffering. 1 million people are displaced. 3,000 people have been killed, and there are reports of food shortages and almost famine for millions of people in Yemen.
No. Yes, moving along.
On to Pakistan. The Express Tribune from Pakistan is reporting that Afghan officials and Taliban are officially meeting in a possible step towards peace talks. There have been some unofficial meetings in various countries in the past few months. This is the first official meeting. The New York Times is calling this the most promising contact between the two warring sides in years. Very interesting, but there are already a few problems. One Taliban official is saying that the delegates in Islamabad were not authorized to be there to attend these meetings, and they suggested that they have been hijacked by Pakistan's powerful intelligence service to appear there. So even though it's a big step forward.
Yeah, but it's a hint of optimism in the mayhem, destruction, and death that you bring me daily.
Daily, yeah. That's my job. That's what I get paid for.
That's what you get paid for. Shoot.
Off to South Carolina. The Senate of South Carolina has voted to remove the Confederate flag from in front of the State House in South Carolina. This is the first hurdle.
Exactly.
It still has to go to the House, the lower body there. But what happened with the Senate is several white senators said that they have come to understand why their black colleagues felt the flag no longer represented the valor of Southern soldiers, but the racism that led the South to separate from the United States more than 150 years ago.
They've come to understand.
They've come to realize.
They've come to realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It took them.
It took them 100 and what?
150 years.
150 years. No, it's remarkable to me, and that I just reminds people over and over again. America, a country wonderful for many, many, many things, but deep down not even deep down on the surface, many hurdles not passed when it comes to racism, inequality, and whatnot.
Yes, people still wearing racism on their sleeves
or
out in the open.
Walking into churches and gunning down, 9 African American people.
Yes. Amazing turn of events in the Bill Cosby scandal. There has been court documents released from his testimony that he gave in 2005 where he admits that he gave drugs to women in order to have sex with them. This is a battle that the AP led to release these documents.
And AP led a great reporter at the AP FYI that is not getting enough credit for breaking all these Cosby news, but that this is a case from 1995 that basically, you know, puts a light on everything that he's been accusing.
Yeah. Many victims. His lawyers, of course, didn't want these documents released because they said that they would shame him. But listen to what the judge said and why his reasoning was that he let these documents come out. He said that Cosby has donned the mantle of public moralist and mounted the proverbial electronic or print soapbox to volunteer his views on, among other things, child rearing, family life, education, and crime. He was like the epitome of the great father, and therefore the judge said.
I've been a journalist for 20 years back, about like 15 years ago. I had to do a huge report about his advice to parents, how to send kids to preschool, whatnot. So it's a terrifying thing.
And that is why the judge decided to let this go. But Whoopi Goldberg is still standing by him. She says, you are still innocent until proven guilty. That's what she said on her show, ABC's The View, yesterday. As more information comes out, people can make judgments. I don't like snap judgments. So Whoopi Goldberg is sticking by her man. Jill Scott, a famous singer in the States, said, I stood by a man I respected and loved. I was wrong. It hurts. So she is giving up on Cosby.
Yeah, I mean, there's a trend here.
And I just want to end last with some pictures from Pamplona. The annual running with the bulls. Let's take some look at this. Sky News says that 1 Brit and 2 Americans have been gored at the annual running of the bulls in the northern Spanish city of Pamplona. Let's look at these pictures.
No, we're looking at these pictures, and this leads me to whoa! Ow! Why?
It's crazy.
Why is this fun? Why is it fun?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
I actually have a cousin who ran with the bulls, by the way.
That
he was
sheds a very bad light on your family. But Ami Kaufman, thank you. Locked in studio as we move along. Last week, we saw a bold attack by militants aligned with ISIS unfold in the Sinai Peninsula, an attack that had many concerned that the jihadists were on the border. But according to information revealed on Tuesday, the group is already making some inroads among some Israelis. The Shin Bet security service in Israel and the Israeli police announced that they have arrested 6 residents of the Negev Bedouin village Hura, among them 4 teachers at state school, for allegedly setting up a local cell that supported ISIS and preached Islamist agenda to their students and others. They also allegedly plan to travel to Syria to fight with ISIS forces. Let's take a look at the following report from Israel and break it down from there.
Another case of Israeli citizens seeking to join the Islamic State terrorist group. Following the lifting of a gag order, Israeli authorities announced that 6 Bedouins living in Israel's southern Negev desert have been arrested on suspicion of supporting IS. 5 of them are from here, the town of Hura, a permanent Bedouin community established in 1989. All 6 belong to the extended Abu al-Khayan family, one of the most prominent in town, with most taking part in meetings of Islamic State supporters in Hura, and 3 even planning on traveling to Syria to fight for the group. This isn't the first time Israelis have tried to join the Islamic State, but what is especially disturbing about this case is that most of those arrested were involved in education. 4 of the 6 detained were in fact school teachers, some of whom taught at this very high school here behind me, a government-funded institution which bears a somewhat ironic name, considering the circumstances, the Peace School. Officials at the school were wary of our cameras and refused to speak because of the sensitivity of the situation. Even at the town council building, where the Israeli flag is displayed, we were refused an official comment by a spokesman eager to keep a low profile. Those who did agree to speak openly condemned any affiliation with the Islamic State.
To tell you the truth, this morning I was sitting with my 5-year-old son, and I asked him what he thought of IS. And he said, they're very bad, father. He's only 5, but because of all the things that he's seen on TV, he knows this. If a small child can reach that conclusion and denounce this behavior, how can an adult educator with a mature mind, who must serve as an example, reach this point? We send our children to receive a good education, not to be pushed towards extremism. This is unacceptable.
The Israeli Minister of Education was likewise vocal in his reaction to the arrests.
This is educational terrorism. There are people who took advantage of their authority as teachers and distributed terrorist ideology to their students. Terrorists will not be teachers in the state of Israel.
A member of the Abu al-Khayan family said off camera the allegations were nothing more than suspicions, but a local school teacher we spoke to admitted that support for IS in the area was a growing and worrying phenomenon. Not long after these off-the-record discussions, we were warned our presence in Hura was unwanted.
Joined in studio by I-24 News senior Middle East Affairs analyst Ali Waqid. Ali, we're looking at this now, northern Israel. This is coming on the heels, obviously, of talks over the course of the last several weeks, ISIS at the gate in Israel, et cetera, apropos Sinai. Is this, I mean, I find it hard with the ISIS story, and I need you to help me out on this, that anybody who has, that everything and anything can be deemed as, a forming of an ISIS cell. Can we look at this scenario as something like that?
First of all, for the good sake of the setting, I will mention Shah in his report said the Abu Qayan family. We're not talking about a family, we're talking about a tribe that counts a couple of thousands of persons at this part of the Israeli border with Egypt, when they have another part of the family or tribe in the Egyptian soil. Some of the members of Abu Qayan family are militants and leader in Ansar Bayt al-Maqdis or in the Islamic State. This is one thing. And the second thing, the Islamic State is becoming the brand. So whenever you want now to recruit somebody or to form a cell, a jihadist cell, the easiest thing is to try to belong to the Islamic State. It will turn your life easier when you try to recruit other members to the cell, or when you try to have money from the Islamic State. We know that the Islamic State, in spite of some of its defeats recently, it's gaining territories and money, of course. But we should not forget that the Arabic population in Israel is part of two entities. One, the Israeli society, but second, the Arab nation. And among the Arab nation, the ideology of the Islamic State is now leading, is dominant among many young people. And the Arabs in Israel are not different than the Arab all around the Arab world. And we should not forget that recently a whole family in the village of Sakhnin just decided to leave Israel and to join the Islamic State. A father, a mother, and three small kids went to Syria. Every day, almost, we are hearing about young people that were arrested before joining the Islamic State or getting back from Syria and Iraq. We have Arab Israeli citizens who were killed in Syria and in Iraq when they fought at the side of the Islamic State. But yet, we are talking about like tens of people, not more.
Not a bulk of, not a bulk of people, like not tens of thousands of people, which is a very valid point.
And not hundreds even.
And not hundreds, exactly. Yeah. And you can see it in every country. That's the thing. I mean, that's the thing that I find so confusing, I think, also for people who are trying to figure out this ISIS phenomena is, it's a brand. It's just using it as the ideology and then coming out. But when you look at something like that for the Bedouin community in Hura, one needs to remember also these are second-class citizens, if not third-class citizens in Israel in many cases. What can be done, though, when it comes to, is there a connection, sorry, not what can be done, is there a connection between that brand and the one that we're seeing in Egypt, if you said it's one family or actually one tribe? Do we believe that there's a connection between these groups in this closed region, that it's being done in some form of an organized way, or that it's rogue among groups?
I'm not sure for the moment that we can talk about an organized way, but you mentioned the word confusion, and in order to understand the confusion, I will say that part of the community serves in the army. We know that the Bedouins in Israel, some of them serve in the army. On the other hand, some of the leaders of the Islamic movement in Israel are from the Bedouin community. The leader of the southern wing of the Islamic State is a Bedouin from that region of the Negev, and this is part of the confusion. And Arab Israeli has built-in confusion. He is an Arab, but he is also an Israeli citizen, and he is influenced. With all
the perks. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just not with all the perks. Valid point. Thank you, Ali, for joining us this morning on this story. When we get back, diplomats' wives in the Middle East. You thought you had it hard? Think about them. But no, we will take a closer look at that traditional role. Stay with us first, as in every morning, the morning news. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, July 8th, 2015. This is still the morning edition on I-24 News. Last I checked, I'm still your LV, which means this is the place you should be. Because I'm not alone as a woman in the studio right now. I'm sitting here with a lovely Tal Shalev, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent, with an amazing woman named Michelle Mazel. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And I will explain to you all who she is in a minute. Being an ambassador, yeah, this sounds bizarre, is charged with many diplomatic responsibilities, and many times those ambassadors are accompanied by family, spouses, and children that are overlooked. The wives, for example, many times sacrifice their career aspirations and hopes back home and have to deal with constant relocations, as well as find themselves in regions that are tumultuous, to say the least, if one is to look at the Middle East. So, Tal Shalev, our intrepid correspondent, went on a mission to figure out who these women are. Tal.
Well, just we'll start with a full disclosure that, as you know, I deal with diplomats on a daily basis, and unfortunately, still most of them are men. But
yes.
I also come...
Lucky you. Yeah.
That can be contested.
Not to be contested, but...
I come from a diplomatic family myself, and my grandfather was an ambassador, and we always were taught with pride about his diplomatic missions around the world. But truth must be said that my grandfather couldn't have done it without my grandmother. And this is definitely a personal homage to my grandmother, just to try and understand the scope of challenges that Diplo wives, as we call them, or they used to be called. Today, there are a bit more women diplomats, so so all of the sacrifice and challenges, of course, apply to men too. We're talking about diplomatic spouses, but we went to explore what exactly also has changed in the past 20 years.
Let's have a look at this report.
My grandmother, Shoshana Shalev, was a warm and intelligent woman, but more than anything, she was always the wife of, that is, the significant other of my grandfather, Ambassador Mordechai Shalev. A Zionist at heart, Israel was the place she always wanted to be, but in the early decades of the state, she accompanied him, always at his side, on 5 diplomatic postings around the world. Nostalgic photos show an elegant and graceful hostess, receiving guests at events and functions, always with a smile and an extended hand. Many times underappreciated and overlooked, diplomatic spouses are an inseparable part of overseas posts. Dispatched around the world, representing their country, side by side with their husbands and families. Speaking with 2 modern Diplo wives, I try to gain a peek into their lives, their contributions, and sacrifices.
Up until the 1970s, wives of ambassadors were considered part of the ambassador's portfolio, and ambassadors were actually rated on how well their wives did in the role of hosting and welcoming official visitors. Life now is very different. For me, when Dan got this position, we decided as a family that it was basically a job for all of us. We were going to represent our country. We were proud to do so. We were honored to do so. And we decided as a family it was going to be something that we all did together.
I'd never been in the Foreign Office myself, but I had a bit of an understanding about what it meant. But truth be told, we lived together and got married while we were in London. So it wasn't until we moved here that I really, really understood what it meant to live as a diplomat.
While their husbands live according to strict diplomatic protocol, the spouses did not have formal duties, but they still need to learn the do's and don'ts of the job.
It's very clear that there are no formal duties, so they're not really allowed to issue any guidelines as such. But that said, I mean, there is definitely sort of soft guidelines. There are definitely things that are best practice and which would be encouraged.
Israel was the first diplomatic post for both Fisher and Gold. Both left well-fulfilled careers to accompany their husbands. While in the past, the supporting and hostess function was socially acceptable, today, women want to be more independent. They want to be their own person and have their own career.
I loved what I did. I was a teacher, and then I was a vice principal at a school for many years. And then I did teacher training, curriculum development, and it was wonderful. And I loved it. And we were able to balance, 2 full-time working parents with 3 children. and it worked well. But when we moved here, we decided that it wasn't going to work anymore. I decided it wasn't a good idea. I needed to give all of my energy to support this endeavor.
Prior to coming here as an ambassador's wife, I was Celia. I was defined by what I did. If someone said, "So Celia, what do you do?" I could say I'm a banker or I'm in headhunting or whatever. I wasn't defined by my partner. So now, while I'm here, I'm very much defined by who I'm married to. But there's a huge offset against that, which is that we have an amazing platform here from which to do really interesting things. We have a very, very full and interesting life. And I believe 100% that my life is wholly richer for being here with Matthew.
There was a sacrifice, sure. But I think in any couple, there are sacrifices. And sometimes in our previous jobs, sometimes it was Dan sacrificing for what I was doing, and sometimes it was me sacrificing for what he was doing. And I think it's all about the balance.
Unable to follow their own careers, the diplomatic spouse instead often becomes incorporated into their partner's work and way of life. Despite the common notion of dinners and cocktail parties, it entails an intensive schedule, numerous events every day, and actually is a full-time job.
A typical day, I don't know, would show me maybe attending a diplomatic spouse event, hosting a coffee here at the house with the speaker, picking up the kids at school, helping with homework, and then maybe in the evening going to a national day or going to an event with Dan. There are a lot of areas where I can actually be of assistance to our mission, to Dan, in his job and to the embassy. Just yesterday, I went to visit a school in Rehovot for girls that received an embassy grant for teaching English. And I feel like my background as an educator actually comes in very handy in times like that actually when I can be helpful, not just as a spouse of the ambassador, but actually as someone who is a professional and brings her own skills to the table.
Fisher and Gold, both Jewish, found a warm and welcoming Israeli society, but still far away from home. Life in a country in constant conflict is quite different from the peace and calm they were used to.
The most difficult time really has to be last summer. It was very difficult for everybody, but it was difficult with two very small children. And it was very difficult sending them to school in the morning, knowing that there would be sirens and that I'd be relying on somebody else to make sure that they were safe.
Diplomatic feuds also play a role. Serving in a period of unprecedented strain between Washington and Jerusalem, Ambassador Dan Shapiro has been charged with managing the difficult Obama-Netanyahu relationship. Fisher has definitely shared the burden.
There have definitely been ups and downs, and I feel like it's really great that we've been here during times when there have been ups and downs, because of the solid relationship that I have, that Dan has, with all of the people here and the Israeli people and the Israeli government, and that despite the times when there have been disagreements, the relationship has still been very strong.
But new postings can sometimes be both a challenge and an opportunity, and Gold actually discovered a new professional enterprise during the family's mission.
So I had no idea really what form my life would take here or what I would spend my time doing. What I did end up doing was a couple of things. Firstly, I developed my photography, and I think I just got quite infected by the Israeli atmosphere of entrepreneurship, and it really got under my skin, and I had an idea to start printing images onto silk and producing scarves, and I started thinking about creating a brand. And whereas maybe in the past I might have thought, no, it won't work or whatever, I think there was something about being here and the attitude of, okay, fine, let's give it a go, what's the worst that can happen?
At the end of the day, despite the sacrifices and challenges, they wouldn't change what they do now for anything.
It's been an incredible, incredible experience for me, for my husband, for our 3 daughters. It's been amazing. It's had ups, it's had downs, but overall it's been just phenomenal.
A beautiful report by Tal Shalev, and amazing and really in-depth look, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful time to actually introduce Michelle Mazel. Michelle, I was reading about you a little bit last night. You are a Diplo wife, okay? You were a Diplo wife, and you basically spent 8 years with the Israeli ambassador to, I mean, you guys traveled all over, with the Israeli ambassador to Egypt, to Cairo, one of my favorite cities in the world, I have to tell you. But looking at this report, Michelle, would you say that your job throughout the years was the same? You were the assistant, you were the supporter?
First of all, I wish the Israeli diplomat and their wives enjoy the status of American or English diplomat, who usually are not the target of constant abuse, insult, and not even talking about the security situation. And you cannot compare. Besides, the children of the Israeli diplomats do not enjoy Hebrew school all over the world, where American or English diplomats can be assured that wherever they go, there will be a school for their children. So the life is so completely different. I mean, nobody would ever dream of asking the wife of the American or the British ambassador why their country is doing this or that. But whenever they see the wife not of an Israeli diplomat, immediately, something which would never do, they wouldn't ask the wife of the Iraqi ambassador at the time of Saddam Hussein or the Libyan ambassador, but the Israeli ambassador, just feel free. I remember first time in Egypt, somebody, the head of the Red Crescent of Egypt, telling me, "You killed my uncle." I mean, okay, fine. I mean,
and you were in Egypt actually also during the time that Anwar Sadat was assassinated.
Absolutely, we were twice. The first posting when the embassy was open, which was in 1983, was only quote unquote a political counselor,
right.
And these were 3 very happy years because we were with the children. And then we came back 15 years later, and then he was the ambassador, and that meant he was a terrorist target number 1 in Egypt, before the American ambassador.
Right.
I mean, this is, think about it. And his bodyguard, because he had Israeli bodyguards, were getting a special a danger bonus. He wasn't getting it, of course, but that's the Israeli Foreign Service for you.
And the Israeli Foreign Service. I'm just wondering, a thought crossed my mind. Did you know Tal's grandmother?
I don't believe so.
No,
even though I am extremely ancient, I don't think.
No, because
the name is of course familiar. My husband,
the Shalev family.
My husband absolutely knows him, but
But for you, Michelle, because you were born in France, you're a graduate of the Institute of Political Science in Paris and law school. You're a Fulbright scholar to the United States. I mean, you, before becoming a diplomatic wife, a woman at a time where it was much harder than today, and it's still not easy, a very accomplished woman. Did you find yourself, as we saw in this report, taking a step back, and wasn't it hard? It was just not only having to represent Israel, but also having to put yourself on the sideline.
Well, on the other hand, the fact that I had such a thorough political education made it easier for me to cope. And of course, you have got to remember that you don't start being the ambassador's wife. Normally, it takes something between 30 and 40 years, unless you're a political appointee, before you get to such an exalted position. So at the beginning, we started in a lovely place called Madagascar, where at the time there was no communist representation and no Arab representation. So it was fairly a smooth sailing until the first revolution. So in the beginning, we enjoyed having help. Just think about it, having help. I'm talking more than 40 years ago with young children at a time when in Israel it wasn't so easy. So it wasn't, no, listen, diplomatic life is not bad. Diplomatic life can be fun. Sometimes it's even more fun when you're not the wife of the ambassador because you have more freedom. You have more freedom, you can say what you want.
Yes.
When you have the wife of the ambassador, you cannot say what you want because otherwise everybody is going to say this is the official position of the State of Israel.
Right.
So if somebody says something dreadful to you, you've got to be careful what exactly you answer. But it's a fascinating life. Yeah. The only thing is no 2 diplomatic lives are equal because somebody can go to England and to the States and to a lot of nice places.
What was the most challenging place that you were stationed with your husband?
Beside Egypt?
Beside Egypt.
We were in Romania at the time of the revolution. Fascinating. I mean, people are shooting all over. They're not shooting at you, but, bullets do not always know what they are doing. And if we had known at the beginning that it was going to be a short revolution, it would have been very nice. But we didn't know.
Yeah, and I want to, because we have just a minute left, I want to, because we said, it's a job of assistance, but you are an accomplished writer. You're an accomplished author.
This is because you know, when you are the wife of the ambassador, you have to find a way to express, I won't say your fears and so on. And so, by the way, my thrillers, which I highly recommend, are available in English as Kindle ebook.
No, Kindle ebooks, and it all started also, your first book was The Ambassador's Wife, which I'm holding on. There is a series, the last one, I think the third Al-Fassi mystery, that's what you're writing, it is available in English. You are a remarkable woman who has seen the world. I want to be a Diplo wife right now, you know, without, and Tal might be one. But, and I want to thank you, Michelle. That was the time that we had. My pleasure. It was wonderful to have you over. As we said, Diplomatic Wives, that was a closer look. Do stay with us. When we get back, something entirely different, some culture, a closer look at, I think it would be new music. There we have it, yes. Ghana music scene. First, though, as in every morning, the news. I-24 News Morning Edition on this July 8th, 2015. I know the date because Ami Kaufman, who's sitting in studio, told me the date. Thank you. Mr. Kaufman, who I owe many dinners to, because in Vienna, they can't seem to sign that deal.
It's not going to happen.
You think? Okay.
I'm just hungry. That's why.
Okay. And if you're watching this show, do send us your ideas for restaurants, of which I can take Ami Kaufman to. So, but it's not Ami Kaufman we're talking about, because we are joined in studio by I-24 News culture correspondent Daniel Campos.
Hello, Yael. How are you? Good
I
morning,
am good. Who has just come back from Hawaii.
I love
wow,
that shirt.
That is gutsy, man.
Thank you very much. You know, it's almost the beginning of the weekend. It's time for some colors,
almost the beginning of the weekend. I gotta tell you, do you have a girlfriend?
Of course, a wife.
You do? Okay. You're married?
I'm married.
Good, because I gotta tell you, with a shirt like that, nobody would date you. So it's very good that you're married already. But there's that too harsh.
It depends in which country, which culture you're talking about.
That's very true.
Where I come from, it's a sign of manlyhood.
Oh.
Where do you come from?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica!
Or, you know, it can be a sign that you're an old gringo coming to visit, checking out the women, the casinos. It can go both
Exactly. Here, the shirt would get you killed. But that said, it takes guts, and it takes also a lot of talent to do what you do, which is be a culture correspondent. You are here with what story for us today?
Well, I have an interesting story. This Jewish French-American producer, Benjamin Lebrave, who he got his double master's in economic statistics in Paris Tech, and he says, you know what, I'm going to go start my own record label in Ghana to help promote the real music.
Because it has nothing to do with what I studied. Okay.
And like his approach is very different. Like we have what we call the generalized world music scene.
Right.
Peter Gabriel, former frontman of Genesis, his Real World Records, which is basically grabbing African elements and westernizing them, making them appeal Western ears.
Is that like what Paul Simon did with them? You know what I'm talking about?
With Graceland.
With Graceland, diamonds on the soles of her shoes.
Exactly.
I feel I'm about to sing. No, it's okay.
So
let it out.
Lebrave's approach is basically, let's give the people the real stuff, what the real urban sound of Africa. I'm not going to manipulate. I'm not going to touch the aesthetics of the music.
I'm just going to show. Let's take a look at this fascinating man and the report.
Salsa, Afropop, reggae, hip-hop. Welcome to Akwaba Music, a record label based in Ghana. Founded by French-American DJ Benjamin Lebrave with the goal of spreading African music and pop culture around the world. In the same form, it is created without interfering with the musical aesthetics used by local musicians. Whether you love it or hate it, these are the sounds of modern-day Africa.
I think technology has a double impact. First of all, it has an impact on music production. With a PC, a sound card, and a couple mics, and a small little area, you can actually record music. That's a huge difference, because music production used to be controlled by a handful of music studios.
Akwaba was also the answer to all the existential questions of Lebrave.
I feel all my life up until the point I founded Akwaba, I was trying to make sense of my interests and professional aspirations and passions. And it only really all came together once I started Akwaba and then moved to Ghana.
From Ghana to Congo, Angola, Togo, and Burkina Faso, among many countries. Akwaba is a record label with no borders, covering a lot of ground in modern-day context.
Anywhere you look, you'll find a studio. For better or for worse, but I think there is something great about this democratization of access to music creation.
By living in Ghana, Benjamin also hopes to challenge the behavior of the international music industry towards Africa.
Why is it still all based in the West? I get it, the markets are there, but the action is here. Why am I the only one, or one of the very few, who decided to move here?
It's been 7 years since he moved to Ghana. Each album he has released is an accomplishment that assures us that Akwaba won't relocate to Paris or to the USA anytime soon.
Daniel Campos in studio. So 7 years he's been living in Ghana. What he produces, does it have a big audience? Is this selling?
It is growing, and a lot of the musicians actually go on tours. One of his famous acts, which he started promoting, was Fucking Boys. That's the name of the band. Fucking Boys. F-O-K-N.
Okay, yeah. I was like, okay.
They're very, very interesting group. They challenge the behavior of, for example, a lot of countries in Africa are prejudiced against homosexuals, homophobic. And
one of the few problems Africa has.
And these groups, they challenge this. They're actually very sarcastic with their vocabulary. They're also political. And he's been promoting a lot of music, and definitely there's an audience for this. Also in Paris.
An audience, but I'm asking, is the audience predominantly in Africa? Is this selling also outside? That's the question.
It definitely is, and it's growing. No doubt, no doubt. Like I said, they're selling their music on iTunes, Bandcamp, different formats. You can even find it on Spotify, a lot of its productions. It's definitely growing. And like I said, it's not the Africa. Look, sometimes when you even watch movies, for example, Hans Zimmer composes African music for movies, which, when they talk about Africa, Hans Zimmer is a music composer. Alex Heffes, Westerners composing African music.
It's all Hakuna Matata.
Exactly.
It's Hakuna Matata or In the Jungle. Yeah, I told you I was going to sing. I was going to sing.
Some people don't like to or refuse to see that these people are having access to Fruity Loops, to different editing softwares. They have computers. They have a virtual DJ, and they're mixing stuff.
And they're mixing stuff, and they have their actual music that they know best.
Exactly.
Yes. That you usually want to hear from it's like I think it's like what they did to Chinese food in the West. In some ways, work with me on this. Chinese food in the Middle East, or let's say per se, Chinese food in Israel always tastes Polish. Right? Exactly. It's Chinese food with a hint of gefilte fish. And that's the thing I think that has happened to African music around the world. But fascinating stuff. Daniel, thank you. You and your very gutsy, courageous Hawaiian shirt are stuck in studio with us.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, as we move to the man in the bow tie. That is...
My next step is the shirt like that. After the bow tie, if I had guts like him.
Exactly. If you came with this shirt and the bow tie, winning.
Totally annihilate him.
Winning, exactly. And a bodyguard, as the voice in my head just said. But the viral spiral that is the Web Review.
Viral spiral. We're going to start with HSBC. This is from Time Magazine. HSBC,
That's a
one of the
big bank.
It's one of the largest banks in the world, has just fired 6 staffers for making a mock ISIS-style beheading video.
Yeah.
And apparently this is done in one of those days, where they have the team building exercises. This is how these people thought they would get together and build their team. and mock
execution.
Yeah, okay. So HSBC was not too happy when it was leaked onto Instagram. Immediately deleted it.
I was going to say, were they not happy with the activity, or were they not happy that it was
I don't think they were
leaked?
happy at all with anything.
Okay, wow.
And those 6 people are no longer working with HSBC.
I want to tell you that when this broadcast is finished, we are going to fake kidnapping, or I will actually chain you to the heater. Yeah,
you might be fired by...
Yeah, and tomorrow you will be appearing with a red jumper. Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
Yes.
Have you ever wanted to look and see who has unfriended you on Facebook?
Yes.
Have you ever been curious about that?
Not that much, because I got to tell you, I find that I actually usually sometimes hit buttons by mistake and actually befriend and unfriend, yeah, without knowing. And then
you think that maybe you're angering people that
I don't even know how that mechanism works. Yeah.
Well, now there's an app for that. It's actually called Who Unfollowed. It's Who Deleted Me.
Who deleted?
There's a thing, something on Twitter that's called Who Unfollowed Me. Very similar. Right. This is Who Deleted Me on Facebook. It's an app that you can have on your iPhone or your Android and see who no longer thinks of you as a friend. This is particularly useful for me. I mean, especially during the last Gaza war, I lost a gazillion friends because of stuff that I said on Facebook. But I don't know. Maybe I'll check it out. Maybe I'll check it out.
Who blocked you?
I don't think it. Maybe it doesn't say that in this item.
But then, what is the point of the blocking and unfriending, feature if others can see you doing it?
Well, blocking is a Twitter word, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
I'm 41.
Blocking is
but in Facebook, you just hide. You don't have to see. You just hide them from your feed.
Oh God, yeah, I'm getting too old for this. And yes.
Viral video.
Yes.
Cuteness alert.
Cuteness
this is
alert.
You know how if there's anything I like is dog videos. This is a dog who for the first time is experiencing air conditioning. Let's check it out.
Okay, please. Let's take a look.
Stop and proof. How that'll make TV on the go better.
When I watch TV, I like to get comfortable. Curl up in my favorite chair and find the perfect film.
Can I get something started for you?
Oh,
Okay, cuteness alert. It's things like that that you bring.
Yeah.
That completely, constantly, every morning explain the bow tie to me.
Really?
Yes.
Doesn't it make your day? Doesn't it make everything happy?
Put together.
This might make you happy. I don't know if any of you are James Bond fans, but there will now be a James Bond musical going from the cinema to the stage on Broadway.
No.
And you know what it's going? You know what it's going to be called?
What?
James Bond the musical.
No.
Yes, it's going to happen probably around 2017. There's time for you to prepare for this.
Listen, they keep doing this. First of all, either in Hollywood, they keep regurgitating the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's like the reboot, the re-thing, the re-that, the re-that.
Yes.
And not everything has to be a musical American.
It's true.
Really, not everything.
Like James Bond is going to sing.
That's bad. That is bad.
Can you sing? I like Stirred, Not Shaken. Thank you
exactly.
very much.
No. Yeah, I know. We're freaking Daniel out. It's like, where am I? But the shirt is fitting in. So, wow. No, it's like, listen, it's like turning The Godfather into a musical.
Wow, that would be horrible.
Horrible. It's taking these really amazing... Sacred. You do not mess with...
That is blasphemy right there.
It is blasphemy. Exactly.
Another viral video for you. And I've watched this one like a gazillion times already because I love it. This is a girl called Nicole Paris who does these beatbox battles with her father, and each time she totally annihilates her father. And we can't show the whole thing. Let's just see a snippet of this. It's fantastic.
Anyway, let's take a look.
Let's take a look.
I messed up.
You stopped too. My turn.
She goes on to totally annihilate him for the next 2 minutes. She is amazing.
No, not only that. How do they do that? Don't try. I'm not going to try.
Maybe Daniel?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, you know how to do this?
Not from my culture either.
No. Okay.
But you know what I like about this video, by the way, is watching the father while he's watching her. He's so proud of what this girl can do. Just like fatherly love of what I have created here.
No, which is wonderful. Which is wonderful because you having daughters would you will understand that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I actually tried to beatbox a little with them yesterday, and I'm not going to.
I'm sorry you didn't bring this, but it's it's that moment where the father is proud. I have to make a confession that my father taught me how to play chess. And for like 24 years, he kept annihilating me and whatnot. And then the first time I beat him, he stopped playing with me.
Are you serious?
Completely. Yeah,
He took it that bad, huh?
I know. There's a moment of sharing here around the table.
My God.
That bad. Yes, Ed.
This is from the Daily Mail. It's called The Worst Sandwich Ever Made. A guy who was in the Edinburgh airport ordered a bacon and egg roll. It cost him 3.20 pounds.
Right.
It took it 15 minutes to make it and get over to his plate. He put the picture on Reddit. Look at that.
And that's what came in.
Look, that's what came in. It went totally viral.
Amen.
Totally viral. And look at the some of the responses are, what are they using? Hummingbird eggs now? and another one said, another Reddit user said, the yolk actually looks like it's been painted in.
It's been painted in, exactly. And I'm sorry, that is not bacon, folks. That is a sliver of something that needs to be. Yeah.
That is not a sandwich.
No, that's not a sandwich.
I stand corrected by it's from the Scotsman, not the Daily Mail.
The Scotsman, exactly.
And the airport said, sadly, on this occasion, we fell below the mark. And
below the mark? Below?
That is an understatement if I have ever seen.
Yeah, it's upsetting, very upsetting.
I just want to finish with one of my favorites, Damon Albarn, the lead singer of Blur. How great is it to be in a concert where you have to be taken off stage? He started at 11 p.m. Started at 11 p.m. He wanted to go on singing. He sang for 5 hours, and the Danish police said, you have to get off the stage. Let's see some pictures of him actually being taken off the stage.
Oh, phenomenal.
He's being picked up. There he goes.
And taken off
the stage after 5 hours. He wanted to go on.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Security came and took him off stage. I gotta tell you though, I mean, if somebody can stand on stage for 5 hours, that man was high. That man was on something.
He might have been. I want what he's having.
Exactly. That man is something they're giving truck drivers in the States to drive cross country.
I would have loved to be at that.
Yeah, I'm going to continue.
Makes me like Blur even more.
No, Blingo, and I want to let you both know that this show will now continue for the next 17 hours. Yes.
Okay, let me go get something first.
That was all the time that we have because, I mean, you have to take your shirt off. Do not forget to tune in tomorrow morning, I-24 News Morning Edition, the place to be every single morning because you get to see Hawaiian shirts. And, of course, stay with I-24 News for the rest of the day for your news.